Walmart Business is in the business of helping your business. Regardless of whether you're building bridges, building spreadsheets, or building lesson plans. Ooh, that looks fun. Walmart Business can help save you time, money, and hassle so you can focus on what you're building instead of what your supply closet is missing. In short, we take care of business so you can do more with yours. We're the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
Immersing yourself in all things soccer ahead of this summer's World Cup? I'm Alex Abnos, senior sports editor from The Guardian. Whether you're a soccer beginner or you know the game inside and out, we've got you covered. From one of the fastest growing soccer newsrooms, The Guardian brings you in-depth World Cup coverage that gets into the winners and losers on and off the pitch. Read, watch, and listen as our journalists connect the dots between the games, the cultures, and this political moment. We'll have daily newsletters throughout the tournament, a global perspective, and a squad of Americans, including me, on the ground with the U.S. national team. Plus, if you want to test your soccer knowledge, try On the Ball. It's a game in the Guardian app, and it's really, really fun. And if you're into stuff like this...
Well, I think the problem is if you give footballers an inch, they will take a mile.
Is it too much when it's this close?
It's a bit much. It's a bit too real. Maybe you could just talk with a slight delay.
Be sure to listen to our Football Weekly podcast for On the Move expert analysis. The Guardian, bringing you the whole picture on soccer. Search Guardian Soccer for more.
Here's a shift worth noting. Better healthcare is care that meets patients where they are. United Health Group is bringing it directly to living rooms. This is a win for patients managing chronic conditions. And here's the interesting thing. By closing those care gaps, administering in-home exams, and identifying risks earlier, more diseases can be prevented and patient outcomes can improve. In 2025 alone, United Health Group patients received over 19 million home visits. Learn more at unitedhealthgroup.com/commitment.
Welcome to the Lessons from the Great Coaches podcast.
I've learned that you don't do it alone.
You learn so many different things from so many different coaches.
That's an elite learning environment.
Failure is not a problem. How you deal with it is a problem.
How to be resilient.
How important it is to infuse joy in the process of learning.
To be a good coach, you've got to give more than you take.
What an interesting life it is to be a leader.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches podcast. My name is Paul Barnett, and here on the podcast, we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership. And so we interview great sports coaches from around the world who are the best leaders that we know to try and find ideas to help all of us lead our teams better. Today's episode is on one of the great coaches in the world today, and that is Pep Guardiola. And I'm joined for the discussion by Dr. David Turner, who's been on the podcast many times before and is a senior lecturer on sports coaching at Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge in the UK. And just before we go to the interview, today's podcast is brought to you by the Macquarie University Business School's MBA program. Designed to empower, challenge and transform, the Macquarie MBA gives you the business skills and knowledge you need to succeed in an evolving global economy. To find out more, search for Macquarie University Business School's MBA. And now please enjoy a discussion about Pep Guardiola.
You're listening to the Lessons from the Great Coaches podcast.
Dr. David Turner, good to see you again. It's the new school year. How are you going? Welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm going good. It is a busy start to the new year, but new educational year, but enjoying it, immersed in it, tired, but feeling good.
Could you maybe tell us a little bit about why you're tired on this particular Tuesday?
Yeah. 3 hours of coaching in two big sports halls with 40 new students on a physical education and sports coaching degree. So wonderful session. Loved it. Love the fact that you take a first session with people and they're going out thanking you for the experience. But you concentrate a lot and you're trying to deliver good coaching sessions, but also help people to become educated as coaches. So a little bit exhausting with that kind of double focus, but really rewarding. And I'll recover in time for next week's session.
Well, hopefully you got a little bit of energy to talk tonight about, I don't know if he's the most famous coach in the world right now. I think everywhere except America he probably is. And of course, we're talking about Pep Guardiola, the Manchester City coach.
Yeah, I think this should be really interesting. I think there's a lot of debates about whether he's the greatest coach in football. We might get into that. But he's certainly an iconic, legendary coach, and I hope we'll get that across.
Well, before I even ask you for the first question, why don't we hear from the people that have worked with him and played for him and listen to the words that they use to describe him?
Sophisticated, magical, intense,
motivator, calculated,
genius,
evolutionary,
great coach,
a perfect job,
excellence,
perfectionist,
unobsessive,
passionate,
visionary.
that is love.
So, David, that's how the people who have worked with him describe him. And what words come to mind when you think about Pep Guardiola?
Many words. Competitive. I mean, one of the interesting things about Pep is that he competes for every single tournament and trophy. So, you know, he's as proud of those 4 League Cup consecutive wins that they had as some of the conceivably bigger trophies. So competes on all levels. He's very competitive. Absolute relentless learner. We'll talk a little bit about his adaptability later, but his learning is amazing. In one of the documentaries been listening to about him, I think it's the BBC documentary, one of the episodes is called A Bit of Bread. And he was described, you know, what was he like when he was young? He was like a bit of bread. He was a good boy, respectable, grounded, but, you know, would soak up every bit of learning he could get from people. So they're 2 of the ones that come to mind, I think, for me.
We're going to get into that learning aspect of his life later on. And of course, we'll hear one of the Gallagher brothers interview him when it comes to his focus on learning and legacy. But why don't we start at the beginning and what makes him worthy of being considered a legendary sports coach?
Yeah, okay. So the first thing I'd say is a serial winner, and he's absolutely dominated modern football. Coached 4 different sides, and with those 4 different sides, he's won 13 league titles in 16 seasons. That is remarkable consistency. He shatters records with historical significance, and I think he actually seeks that out. Again, in one of the documentaries, he talks about clubs where the shirt has more weight. In other words, he means there's a historical background with the club. There's an expectation of excellence. I think he likes to challenge himself with that. He cultivates this ruthlessly effective but also beautiful football. So there's a nice little tension there between being effective and beautiful. His football's been described as joyous at times. He's changed and influenced the development of the game of football in 3 national contexts. If I just go into that in a little bit more detail, when he's in Spain with Barcelona, the Spanish national team won 2 Euros and a World Cup during that period with a team that featured 10 Guardiola players. When he's in Germany, they won the 2016 World Cup when he was at Bayern, and that featured 9 Guardiola players. England have twice been runners-up at the Euros while he's at City, and that's featured 6 of his players. So he's had this broader influence, I think, on the national context of football. And then just finally for now, I think for me, he's a rare example of a great player who became an even greater coach. I remember when he first came on the scene, I was kind of thinking, oh, here we go, another famous ex-footballer privileged into a coaching position who's going to crash and burn. And I couldn't have been more wrong with that. And I understand why that was now, and we can go into that a bit later perhaps. But he's certainly a great player, who's even a greater coach.
And the question that is already doing the rounds, and I think it's a little too early because he's still got a long way to go in his coaching career, but it's who's better, Guardiola or Ferguson?
Yeah, I suppose we need to say straight away that Ferguson is actually Guardiola's hero. And there was a sliding doors moment when it might have been possible for Guardiola to take over from Ferguson when he retired. That nearly happened. So we could have had a very different scene in Manchester. But, you know, this conversation is going on in pubs, so we might as well have that conversation now. So let's compare a little bit, Guardiola and Ferguson. And I guess I'd caveat that by saying we're comparing apples and oranges. They're coaching in slightly different eras, and they've got very different backgrounds. But let's go for it nonetheless, and we can talk it through. So just in terms of win percentage, Guardiola's on 73%, Ferguson had 58%. In terms of national contexts in which they coached, Guardiola has coached successfully in 3 different national contexts. Ferguson's coached in 2, Scotland and England. In terms of trophies won, Ferguson's ahead. He's got 49, 38 at Manchester United alone. But Ferguson coached for 39 years, while Guardiola's only coached for 17 years, and Guardiola's on 40. So if we look at trophies won per season, Guardiola is superior at 2.5 per season, Ferguson 1.5. Champions Leagues, Guardiola's won 3 with 2 different clubs. And in the 2 finals with Barcelona, he beat Ferguson's Manchester United. That's the only 2 times they've faced each other as managers. Ferguson, of course, has got 2 Champions Leagues with Manchester United. Continental trebles, Ferguson's got 1. Guardiola's got 2, and Guardiola's the only manager to achieve 2. In terms of trophyless seasons, it's quite interesting. Guardiola's only ever had 1 trophyless season, his first season at Manchester City. Ferguson had 3 trophyless seasons, his first 3 seasons at Manchester United. And Ferguson was rumoured to be 1 game away from the sack in that 3rd season, after that 3rd season, sorry. Guardiola's never been in danger of being dismissed in his career. So in terms of best run of Premier League titles, Guardiola's won 6 titles in the last 7 seasons, which is remarkable. But we need to remember that Ferguson won 8 titles in 11 seasons at his prime. But as I said earlier, I think Guardiola's certainly had a greater influence than Ferguson on the development of the game and the way it's played more broadly. Ferguson was ranked as world's best coach by the International Federation of Football History and Statistics. Pep was 3rd behind Mourinho. But that period that vote was about was 1996 to 2022. And Guardiola's continued to be successful past that. World's best club coach, twice won by Ferguson, 3 times by Guardiola, and 4 times on the record by Mourinho. So if I sum up, I think Ferguson's certainly got greater longevity. He's certainly a more renowned, established coaching legend. He created positive cultural change and competitive success at 2 underperforming clubs. With various different vintages and blends of teams in the latter at Manchester United. I often say he's like a master wine blender with the different vintages he had there. But Guardiola's got greater competitive success relative to his time in the job. He's had a greater influence on the broader game, and he's taken Manchester United and Manchester City from great to even greater. And he's the greatest and most successful manager of both Barcelona and Manchester City. So listeners can maybe make up their own minds from that. I did have a heated debate in a pub the other night with a friend, but he is a Manchester United supporter. He's still firmly in the Ferguson's the greatest camp. I'm in the camp of Guardiola's the greatest. The difference between the amount of games they've managed may never be resolved. You know, it's possible that Guardiola will go into international management before he reaches the amount of trophies at club level that Ferguson did. But we might talk about Guardiola's possible future later.
Just listening to you, I'm reminded of this constant feedback I get on the podcast, which is insert person's name is not a great coach. Or, Paul, how do you determine if someone's a great coach? And the answer I give is, well, I don't. If I hear another coach describe them as great, that's 1 tick. If I read an article and their players describe them as great, I jot their name down. Or if they've won a significant championship, I also jot their name down. 3 very different approaches to thinking about great. And what I find with Sir Alex Ferguson is just the ongoing, continual emphasis by the people who have played from him about how great he was. I don't know whether you get that as much with Pep.
I think there's a lot of respect for Pep as a serial winner. I think a lot of his players talk about his dedication and his commitment. I think when I hear Ferguson's ex-players, it's a lot about the cultural change they had with him. It's a lot about how much they looked up to him. And I said about comparing apples and oranges, right? Ferguson was an authoritarian coach. Now, Guardiola is a collaborative coach in a lot of ways. So they are very different approaches. That working together with people or, being in charge of people. Now, I know there are also some lovely coach-athlete relationship stories with Ferguson, but he was very much an in-charge authoritarian coach, and he was the boss. I think Guardiola over time has become more collaborative, has given players more freedom, and is much more willing to share the load and responsibilities. So again, they're very different. It's an unfair story to kind of pick one or the other, isn't it? And they're both legendary. And as I say, Pep really looked up to Ferguson as a hero, and nearly took over from him. And when Pep's team beat Manchester United in one of those two Champions League finals, I remember Ferguson going wow at the football that Guardiola had produced. And if a legend goes wow about another legend, that's incredible.
I think before we completely drop the subject and move on, I did a posthumous episode with Sir Matt Busby and Jock Stein as well. And both of those men were influenced by each other. And what I took out of it, Jock was at Celtic and, of course, Sir Alex was at Man United. They took an approach to leadership where they tried to influence the whole club, and both of them felt that they needed to do that in order to have the harmony they needed to create the culture that was going to be essential for success. I think they were both very successful at it. I think Sir Alex took something from both of those men and tried to do something similar at Man United. And I think that's where his drive for control came from. Whereas I don't think Pep has to worry about that because his results just speak for themselves. Get in his way at your own peril.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And we do need to recognise that Ferguson's battles with cultural change were massive at Aberdeen and Manchester United. Aberdeen, they've probably got this inferiority complex, and he gets them to challenge the duopoly of Celtic and Rangers, and ends up winning a Cup Winners' Cup against Real Madrid in the final. Just incredible. When he goes to Manchester United, I said about his first 3 trophyless seasons, he needed a lot of cultural change there. There was a booze culture. He needed to establish himself over a period of time. Of course, Pep wouldn't get that time nowadays, so nobody else would. But the cultural change that he enacted was remarkable. And in order to enforce that, a la the style of Jock Stein or Matt Busby, you have to be in charge of that culture, the figurehead of that culture, which of course he was. And that's coming back from his own roots as well, of being a union leader in the shipbuilding area and things like that.
Now, we want to go on to talk about Pep. That's why we're here. So we'll park Sir Alex, Sir Matt and Jock Stein. And I want to get into the idea of coaching superpowers and what Pep's may or may not be. And to frame this discussion, I'd like to introduce this short clip. It comes from the Prime series where they spent a year following Man City, and I think it's a great illustration of Pep's approach to communication.
I know it's difficult, guys. I know because you want to win. I know that, guys. I know you want to win. But you have to learn to play football with courage. Our best thing in our season is because it doesn't matter where we were, we play with a fucking character, with courage to play. For what? To arrive to the final. What sense is arrive to the final and don't do what we have done all the season? Because at the end, we will have to go in quarterfinals in one place in Champions League, guys. And you have to show who we are. And that is the test you have to do. As we play short here, always to find Nico, Vini, Dino, Gundo. You pass the ball to find there. You pass the ball because they jump. And when they jump, the space is there. They don't jump, it's alone. Sure, go, commit. They don't commit, why do you have to commit? Because they jump. He stretch the ball. When the ball is here, guys, when we are in that position, we pass. What is the space? He's carrying. When the ball is here, like that, he's the hit. Okay.
So, David, there's Pep talking quite eloquently to the team, imploring them to play with courage. And, of course, he's known for being a master tactician. But what do you think his coaching superpower is?
I've got one major superpower, but I'll start with some lesser ones first. I suppose Superman had a few abilities, right? So I'll go with perfectionism first of all. And, in terms of linking that to bravery and courage, Pep's perfectionism takes him to places that he hasn't been before, clubs haven't been before. A phrase we hear a lot from the teams that he's coached is, we've never seen football like that before. So we're going somewhere new, we're going somewhere different. If you're constantly going to be pushing the envelope at the edge of your current capabilities, then bravery and courage are needed to do that. So perfectionism is a really great quality that Pep has. With that come a few different things. Great attention to detail. He's a perpetual innovator. Now, interestingly, I wouldn't say he's greatly inventive, but he is innovative. He takes ideas and he adapts them and morphs them and borrows them. He's driven by his ideas, but he's also driven by his doubts. He constantly doubts himself. Comes from a humble beginning, very grounded in family values, etc., but has that humility that he doesn't know everything. I'll come back to that a little bit later. So we end up with my better students accuse me of doing this to them. They say to me, "Oh, you're always trying to encourage me to get better. I'm permanently dissatisfied." So we've got this permanent dissatisfaction with the self. So he's rarely happy. Just been reading Marty Perronau's latest book, The Pep Revolution. And he talks about how they've won a game 6-1 in there, and Pep is not really happy with it. So relentlessly demanding, pushes himself and those around him to the point of exhaustion. And again, I guess that's bravery, isn't it? When you're exhausted to carry on. Problem solving, which comes with it. He's constantly searching for ways to change a game, to tweak things. He ensures the team is progressing, striving to be the best version of themselves. He says we've got to be demanding with ourselves. So effort and constant intention to improve are essential and non-negotiable in terms of Pep's culture. And then just finally with the sub-qualities, before I go on to his super quality, he's an obsessive workaholic, which causes him at some points to suffer. And finally, there's a really interesting thing here about insecurity. In Marty Perronau's book, there's a sentence about how he works hard because he worries he lacks natural talent. And that might seem incredible to us, but that's something about this perfectionism and permanent dissatisfaction and doubt that it makes you work even harder. The superpower, if I'm going to put my finger on it, is adaptation. Pep continues to learn and develop despite success. Now, a lot of people, when they achieve success and consistent success, will stick with the recipe, but he continues to learn, develop, tweak, try things. Again, continues to be brave, courageous, encourages his team to be brave, courageous. I guess I'm thinking back to when he started at Manchester City, and he changed the goalkeeper from a traditional shot stopper to a goalkeeper who could play with his feet and distribute, etc. Didn't go well to start with. As I said, he didn't win a trophy in that first season. Big criticisms of having a goalkeeper who was a ball-playing goalkeeper. In the end, what does he do? He buys an even more ball-playing goalkeeper and sticks to his principles, and eventually changes the game. I've been to see third-tier football in the last couple of seasons where they're playing a ball-playing goalkeeper now. That's his influence on the game. The thing he wants to be is to be challenged to improve. So it's a nice phrase in the Perronau book, I am here to work hard and keep getting better. And he also talks about who's going to disagree with me and tell me I should be doing things differently. Lovely quote in the book is, when you face a test and overcome it, that's when the satisfaction comes. So I think Pep enjoys being challenged, enjoys overcoming barriers or perceived problems, and that's something that drives him. We talked about him being a sponge earlier on. So if you're a sponge, then you welcome those challenges, those opportunities. He's responded to changing circumstances that have also changed him. So he's changed teams, he's changed players. If you want to think about people like Lahm and Stones, who he's converted into different positions. Stones, at one point in one season, played 5 different positions. there's a lot of teaching going on there, a lot of change, a lot of adaptation. The phrase I've got for Pep that keeps coming up for me, this is my phrase, I guess, rather than the stuff I've read about him, but transformational and transformed. So he transforms others, but he lets circumstances transform him. He's kind of ever-changing, but doesn't change. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, but it's adaptation within principles. So what I mean by that, the analogy I often use with my students is about coaching principles and values is maybe a boat at anchor. So if you imagine the boat is floating on the water and the anchor is below, and the anchor will let the boat drift a certain amount, but it won't let it drift away from the core values too much. Pep seems to me to have done this masterstroke of becoming more flexible with his principles. He's still got principles, attacking football, build from the back, etc. But he'll try more and more with that bravery and that. He'll let the anchor out, if you like, more and more, and the boat will drift, but he's still got the things holding him in place. So this eternal becoming, I would describe, that's his coaching superpower. An eternal becoming and his facilitation of the becoming of clubs and players as a result of that.
Immersing yourself in all things soccer ahead of this summer's World Cup, I'm Alex Abnos, senior sports editor from The Guardian. And whether you're a soccer beginner or you know the game inside and out, we've got you covered. Read, watch, and listen as our journalists connect the dots between the games, the cultures, and this political moment. We'll have daily newsletters throughout the tournament, reporters on the ground with all the big teams, and the legendary Football Weekly podcast. The Guardian, bringing you the whole picture on soccer. Search Guardian Soccer for more.
Walmart Business is in the business of helping your business. Regardless of whether you're building bridges, building spreadsheets, or building lesson plans. Ooh, that looks fun. Walmart Business can help save you time, money, and hassle so you can focus on what you're building instead of what your supply closet is missing. In short, we take care of business so you can do more with yours. We're the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
I listened to you describe him, and I listened, through the context of being a CEO. And if I have someone in the team who's an obsessive workaholic, who's relentlessly demanding, you would move them on. They would be so disruptive in that environment.
Yeah.
And yet, time and time again, when I interview great coaches, they have this obsessiveness. And the other thing I pick up from your description of him is they have this desire to keep learning. I remember when we interviewed Justin Langer, the cricket coach, he said, I hope on the day I retire, I'm considered a novice coach. I hope I'm still learning. And this thirst seems to drive them to the point of obsession. And yet it pushes them to develop the people around them in ways that are anything but common. In fact, I would say they're in rarefied air a lot of the times of what they're achieving. But the word in there that caught my attention was humility. And I'm wondering if you could unpack that a little bit for us and tell us why you think humility is part of his makeup.
Yeah. As I alluded to earlier, he comes from a humble background, rural background. He learned most of his football on the street, which gave him some technical ability. But he wasn't very big when he was a player. He nearly got dropped from Barcelona. He was very thin, stick thin. It was only someone else who was stick thin when they were a player, Johan Cruyff, who championed him quite a bit. Cruyff, when he was younger, was so skinny, his coach sent him to do some athletics training before he brought him back to the club. I guess he's had that insecurity as a player when he's younger. He wasn't sure that he was going to make it at all. I think you need, we said about him being a sponge earlier, and we said at school he was a sponge, a bit of bread, as they said. If you constantly look up to people and want to learn from people, you have to have that humility. The constant learning that you talked about that characterizes legendary and great coaches, you can't not have humility, because it's the humility to know that you don't know everything, or to realize that there may be some other possibilities that you're not familiar with yet. I'm doing research on this, so I guess I would say it, but it's an embracing of ignorance. It's knowing that I don't know everything. It's knowing that there might be something out there that might be useful. It's knowing that I might need to be brave or courageous and try something, or I might need to encourage my players to do that. That I think is the essence of his humility. Somebody said about coaches that they're like sharks. If they stop swimming, they're going to sink, kind of thing. And I think John Wooden said, when you're through with learning, you're through.
I was doing some work recently with the business school here, and there's a lady that leads it, Dr. Tess Howes, and she was doing a module on leadership, and she had this fascinating lecture that I just happened to catch the end of around followership and what makes a great follower. And she then segued that to say that great leaders are often great followers because they can create space for others to step into and lead. So they don't try to take all the space from themselves. They're humble enough to say, oh, I could hand the leadership over to you on this, David, and therefore I'll learn something as you go along. And it just struck me as such an illuminating idea, not something I'd considered before. But when I hear you talk about Pep, I see that. I see him stepping forward and looking at others with a sense of curiosity that is almost saying, please, show me how to lead on this. Show me what you think.
Yeah, I think one of the things we need to talk about that might be connected to this, he really appreciates his rivals and rival teams. It could be a soundbite, but I don't think it is. How much he appreciates Klopp and how much he appreciates how Liverpool pushed Manchester City. This idea that you honour your opponent because they bring out the best in you. I think I've seen a lot of that, so that's another perhaps aspect of humility. There's something to say quickly about Thomas Frank, which links him with Guardiola. They are now the top two in terms of longevity as current Premier League managers. And it's really interesting that they're innovative, brave, courageous coaches, and yet they're the ones who've stayed in the job. That's really interesting. You could play safe, but get the sack.
Well, I think we could have a separate episode on Thomas Frank. I mean, I interviewed him when he was coaching back in the Championship, and it's been so special to see him develop and listen to the way he talks. I mean, I think he has a teaching background, and he worked with youth, and his ability he just talks about care and love, and just uses words that you would never expect a Premier League coach to use, but that's for another day. Back to Pep. How have you seen his style or his philosophy evolve over time?
With that emphasis on adaptation, greatly. A quick quote from the Perinal book again. There is no bigger risk than not taking a risk at all. That's from Pep. So he's constantly taken a risk and changed things. Over time, I think he's become tactically more flexible. He obviously developed the false nine idea at Barcelona with Messi initially, but he's had false nine iterations at Manchester City that have been slightly different, where a broader range of players scored, for instance, while Messi dominated the scoring under Guardiola. He's pioneered the small midfielders idea at Barcelona. It wasn't just his. There were other people who decided at La Masia, that the academy, that small midfielders could make it and could compensate for size. But he's gone with that experiment, with that innovation, and seen it through. He showed faith at Barcelona in academy products. I think one of the reasons that he did that was he was taken over at a point of turmoil where there were multiple divorces in the squad and players were going out partying and individuals, and he wanted people who were more wedded to the culture of the club. And having gone through the academy himself, he could see the possibility in that. So, for instance, he champions Busquets as a holding midfielder who he'd coached at Barcelona B, and brings him into the main squad. And then Busquets, by the way, becomes the hero for Rodri at Manchester City, so it all becomes cyclical. He goes to Bayern Munich and he learns how to counter the counter-attack, which is, again, a big part of this idea of Pep wanting a challenge, wanting something to sharpen him up. He comes to the Premier League and he eventually ends up coping with the physicality and athleticism of the Premier League. I think his latest iteration of a Manchester City side is his most physical, most athletic side, big athletic players. Over time, I think he's demanded more versatility from his players. Talked about Stones playing in multiple positions. when you look at Stones now, it's hard to work out. Is he a defender who's become a midfielder, or is he a midfielder who used to play some defences? It really has transformed that player, and that's an interesting example. He awakens these kind of possibilities in others. A really nice theme in the Pep Revolution, Marty Perenal book, is where he discusses how his relatively new assistant, Juan Malillo, who he used to play for in Mexico when he played, has really had an impact on Pep in terms of change over time. So Lillo seems to help him stay calm, become more serene about how he observes and thinks about football. So Pep himself states that he's more relaxed, calmer, more serene, enjoying it more, managing emotions better. And that might be managing his own emotions and players' emotions. Don't know if you remember that famous incident where he played like a video and music from Gladiator, and he over-aroused his players at Barcelona. I think he's better at managing those sort of things now. He seems less intense. It seems remarkable that Pep could have been at a club for 7-8 years. At one point, he seemed like one of these coaches who would burn himself and everybody else out in 3 or 4 years. But he seems to have significantly changed in that regard. So some of the things that Lillo encouraged him to do was less coaching interventions, more freedom and creativity for the players. So Pep is renowned for teaching his players, and there's that famous clip of him talking to Joshua Kimmich after a local derby important game where Kimmich has starred and his stats are fantastic, but Pep's on the pitch berating him because he wanted him to be 5 yards deeper or something, so always teaching. But this quote from the Perenal book, I think, is really nice to illustrate how that might have changed over time in terms of his teaching. So Pep says, tactics are the way players interpret an idea, their understanding of what they should be doing every minute of the game. They teach me, not the other way around. Now, if he's starting to talk about they teach me, he's saying that some of those players are so extraordinary in how they interpret the roles that he gives them that he thinks about it differently. And that, back to what I said earlier, is a collaborative style of learning, a two-way reciprocal learning, whereby he gives the players more space, but learns from that more himself as a coach.
Oh, terrific. And I was just reminded as you were talking about that over-arousal issue that he had, how it was replicated in the Ted Lasso episode where it also happened. And I understand they did use the situation of Barcelona as the blueprint for that episode, but I digress. Perhaps just to finish with, David, what do you think the future might be for Guardiola? There was talk that he was going to step in and coach England. That hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Where do you think he's going to go next? What do you think will happen?
Yeah. Well, he's out of contract at Manchester City from June 2025. He's recently stated several times that he's not decided yet whether he's going to stay. A really interesting thing at Manchester City is there's a lot of people in the management structure who worked with him in the past or even played with him in the past. Chiki Begiristain being a key one of those who he played with at Barcelona and was part of the management structure at Barcelona when he was coaching there. Begiristain is the sporting director and his longtime friend and compatriot then, but he moves on next summer. And Pep has said, a part of me is leaving. And that's an interesting signpost to the fact that he might choose that to be a moment when he leaves. For me, there are 3 possible paths to the future for Pep. He could choose to stay at Manchester City to complete a decade at the club, which would be quite incredible. If he does that, it gives him a chance to catch up with his hero Ferguson in terms of trophies. At his current rate of trophies per season, he'll surpass Ferguson in 4 seasons if he's still coaching club teams. There's a really interesting development on that. You know, the 115 fair play charges that are hanging over Manchester City at the moment. Pep's been very vociferous in defending their position on that. And the really interesting thing is he said that if they get demoted down the league, as some people think they might, that would make him more likely to stay, which is really interesting. It's a kind of, for want of a better term, bloody-mindedness that, I'm going to stay. But also I think he's genuinely grateful to the club, doesn't want to see them harmed, wants to see wants to be perhaps the person who brings them back up if they go down. So there's an interesting possible path there. He could coach a team in a different national context. So, I don't see him taking over another Premier League side. There's been some rumblings lately that he might go to the Saudi Pro League, but personally, I don't see that because it doesn't fit in with this idea that he likes to be challenged at a top level, and it doesn't fit in with the idea that he likes to work at clubs of historical significance. So I'm not too sure about that rumour. But he could go to a different national context, somewhere like Italy maybe. The final one is very intriguing. He could fulfil his ambition, and he stated this ambition several times, to coach a national team at major tournaments. For instance, he was linked with the England job. I'm personally disappointed that he's not going to take that on for England and the possibilities that might add. He has also been linked to Brazil recently, which is an interesting one. If he did take over the England job at the moment, it would address a number of concerns, put it that way. It would address tactical shortcomings. It would address the fact that people seem to want a more adventurous playing style. They might want a coach who can improve players, who can change the team, who can make them more than the sum of their parts, and who's a respected serial winner. So he was a great candidate. I guess Tuchel's only got 18 months on his contract, so still a possibility for Pep. But if Pep doesn't coach England, he will coach a national side at some point. I just suspect he might stick around in club management to come up towards Ferguson with those trophies first.
David, fantastic conversation. I thank you for your research into Pep. You've brought his style and philosophy to life in such an illuminating way. So thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. Those students of yours are lucky to have this kind of learning being played back to them in the classroom. So I look forward to talking to you soon about another great coach or a topic related to great coaching.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. That was really enjoyable.
Hi everyone, Paul again, and I hope you enjoyed our discussion on Pep Guardiola and took a couple of things away that you can bring back to your own team for discussion. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like Alistair McCaw, who after listening to our episode on coaches as educators, which featured Valerie Condis-Field, said, "Coach Val is fantastic. Always appreciate and love her honest approach. Great interview. Well done, Paul." We love the interaction with the people around the world who listen. And so if you have any feedback or comments, please let us know. And if they're positive ones, then please let a friend or two know as well. All the details on how to connect with us are in the show notes or on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com.
Walmart Business is in the business of helping your business. Regardless of whether you're building bridges, building spreadsheets, or building lesson plans. Ooh, that looks fun. Walmart Business can help save you time, money, and hassle so you can focus on what you're building instead of what your supply closet is missing. In short, we take care of business so you can do more with yours. We're the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
Immersing yourself in all things soccer ahead of this summer's World Cup, I'm Alex Abnos, senior sports editor from The Guardian. And whether you're a soccer beginner or you know the game inside and out, we've got you covered. Read, watch, and listen as our journalists connect the dots between the games, the cultures, and this political moment. We'll have daily newsletters throughout the tournament, reporters on the ground with all the big teams, and the legendary Football Weekly podcast. The Guardian, bringing you the whole picture on soccer. Search Guardian Soccer for more.
We know life is busy. That's why saving money should be effortless. With Atlantic Union Bank's Roundup Savings, every time you use your debit card, your purchase rounds up to the nearest dollar and automatically goes into savings. So whether you're grabbing coffee, filling the tank, or picking up groceries, you're saving without even thinking about it. It's just one of the ways Atlantic Union Bank makes managing your money easy. Learn more at atlanticunionbank.com or stop by a branch today. Atlantic Union Bank. Any way you bank.